Imagine stumbling upon an army frozen in time, thousands of life-size soldiers, silent and stoic, buried beneath the earth for over 2 millennia. This isn't fantasy, it's the Terracotta army of Xi'an, China.
I think they all look different. I can't see any two that are the same. Some of them have got a bit of a belly on them. Some of them are very, very tall. Were they all individually crafted?
They really quite individual. You see the mustache is different, and also the eye shape.
For decades, its sheer scale and uncanny realism baffled experts, raising countless questions about its creation. Who built it, how and why? While the mystery captivated the world, science has been quietly working, piecing together clues. Now many of those long-standing questions finally have answers, revealing the ingenuity and immense power behind this astonishing underground legion. But how did this incredible discovery even happen? It wasn't found through careful historical research or archaeological planning, but rather, quite by accident, changing history in an instant.
We have hundreds, thousands of weapons here, all of which look very standardized, mass-produced. But we want to find out how that was achieved. How is it that they could produce so many weapons in such a relatively short period?
The story begins not in the hallowed halls of academia, but in the parched fields of Shanxi province near the city of Xi'an. In March 1974, a group of local farmers, including Yang Zhifa and his brothers, were facing a persistent drought. Desperate for water, they decided to dig a new well. As they hammered away at the dry earth, about 1.5 kilometers east of a large, unassuming mound known locally as Mount Li, their tools struck something hard. It wasn't rock. Curious, they dug further, pulling out fragments of reddish-brown pottery, what looked like parts of a clay figure. Initially, some villagers thought these might be pieces of old statues from a forgotten temple, perhaps deities to be revered. They collected some fragments. Yang Zhifa even gathered up some strange bronze arrowheads he found amongst the clay, perhaps hoping to sell them. Word of the unusual finds eventually reached local authorities, and crucially, archaeologists like Zhao Kangmin at the Lintong County Museum. Intrigued by the reports, Zhao visited the site. What he saw convinced him this was no ordinary find. The initial investigation quickly escalated. As archaeologists began tentative excavations around the well site, the sheer scale of what lay beneath the farmers' fields started to dawn on them. It wasn't just a few broken statues, it was rows upon rows of life-size terracotta figures, soldiers, horses, buried in long, subterranean corridors. What was meant to be a week-long survey rapidly turned into a monumental archaeological undertaking, revealing the largest group of pottery figures ever found and hinting at an entire underground complex of staggering proportions. The Emperor's secret army was quite literally coming to light. Once excavations began in earnest, the true immensity of the Terracotta army left the world speechless. This wasn't just a collection of statues, it was a meticulously arranged life-size replica of a vast military force buried in enormous underground pits. Estimates suggest there are over 8,000 soldiers spread across 3 main pits, accompanied by around 130 chariots pulled by over 520 horses and an additional 150 cavalry horses. And incredibly, archaeologists believe thousands more figures remain buried, still waiting to be uncovered within the vast necropolis, which spans an estimated 56 square kilometers, around 22 square miles. The figures themselves are astonishingly detailed, standing at heights corresponding to their rank, generals being the tallest. They represent various branches of the Qin military. You see heavily armored infantry, lighter-clad foot soldiers ready for action, kneeling crossbowmen poised to fire, standing archers, cavalrymen with their distinctive pillbox hats, and chariot drivers protected by extra armor. There are even representations of high-ranking officers and officials, seemingly directing the silent troops. What struck early observers and continues to amaze visitors today is the incredible realism and variety. Though constructed over 2,200 years ago, these aren't stylized or symbolic figures. They are life-size, capturing the human form with remarkable accuracy. Their uniforms, armor-plating hairstyles like intricate top knots or caps, and even the tread on their shoes are rendered with meticulous detail. Perhaps most famously, each soldier appears to possess unique facial features. While some scholars initially thought they might be portraits of actual soldiers, the sheer number makes this unlikely. Yet the apparent individuality, different expressions, ages suggested by features like beards or lack thereof, possibly indicating younger soldiers under 17, and distinct facial structures, gives the impression of a real diverse army frozen in clay. It's this combination of overwhelming scale and uncanny individuality that truly defines the wonder of the Terracotta Army, a silent testament to the power that commanded its creation. The mastermind behind this subterranean spectacle was none other than Qin Shi Huang, the man who forged China itself. Born Ying Zheng, he inherited the throne of the Qin state at the young age of 13, around 246 BCE. The China he knew was a land fractured by centuries of conflict, known as the Warring States period. But Ying Zheng possessed ruthless ambition and military genius. Over decades, he systematically conquered the rival states Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, and Qi, employing a massive and effective army, estimated by some to have numbered over 500,000 men. In 221 BCE, he succeeded. For the first time, China was unified under a single ruler. Ying Zheng proclaimed himself Qin Shi Huang, meaning First Emperor of Qin. His reign, though lasting only until his death in 210 BCE, was transformative. He didn't just conquer, he consolidated. He standardized weights and measures, currency, the Banliang coin, and, critically, the written script across the vast empire, laying foundations that would endure for millennia. He built extensive road systems and canals, including precursors to the Great Wall, by connecting existing fortifications. He abolished the old feudal system, replacing it with a centralized administration. However, Qin Shi Huang was also known for his tyranny and his profound obsession with immortality. He desperately sought the elixir of life, sending expeditions across the seas in search of mythical lands and elixirs, and consulting magicians and alchemists. Ironically, his quest for eternal life may have hastened his death, as historians suggest he may have ingested mercury compounds prescribed by his advisors, believing they conferred longevity. This obsession extended to his preparations for the afterlife. He began planning his mausoleum complex almost immediately upon taking the throne. The Terracotta Army wasn't just art, it was a functional part of this plan. A magical, eternally loyal army intended to protect him from his enemies and allow him to continue ruling in the next world, a perfect microcosm of his earthly power buried with him for eternity. The manufacturing enigma. When the sheer scale and detail of the Terracotta Army became clear, archaeologists and historians were confronted with a monumental question. How on earth was this achieved over 2,200 years ago? Think about it, thousands upon thousands of life-size figures, each seemingly unique, equipped with real bronze weapons, all constructed in a relatively short period. Historical texts suggest the entire mausoleum complex took around 38 years and involved upwards of 700,000 laborers. This presented a fascinating paradox. The apparent individuality of each soldier, particularly their faces and hairstyles, suggested painstaking individual craftsmanship, almost like portraiture. Could ancient artisans really have sculpted 8,000 unique portraits from life? The logistics and time required seemed utterly impossible. On the other hand, the sheer number of figures screamed mass production. Creating such a vast quantity demanded efficiency and standardization. But how could mass production techniques result in such variety and realism? Traditional assembly lines as we understand them today seem incompatible with the level of artistry displayed. How could they possibly reconcile the need for quantity with the appearance of bespoke quality? What kind of production system could churn out thousands of figures that looked different? This was the manufacturing enigma that baffled researchers. The technology of the Qin dynasty, while advanced for its time, seemingly lacked the methods needed for such a feat. There were no historical records detailing the construction process. Adding to the mystery, were molds used? If so, how did they achieve such variation? Were they sculpted entirely by hand? If so, how was consistency in size and form maintained across thousands of units, and how was it done so quickly? The challenge lay in understanding the intersection of art and industry, figuring out the methods that allowed the Qin workshops to produce an army that was both immense and incredibly detailed, a silent legion that held its manufacturing secrets tightly for centuries. Unlocking this required turning to the very materials the army was made from. To unravel the mystery of the Terracotta Army's creation, scientists began looking closely at the figures themselves, treating them almost like forensic evidence. One key area of investigation was the clay. Where did it come from? Was it all sourced from one location or multiple? By analyzing the chemical composition of the terracotta, identifying trace elements and mineral signatures, researchers could start fingerprinting the raw materials. This analysis revealed that the clay was indeed local, sourced from the vicinity of the mausoleum complex, likely near the kilns where the figures were fired. More intriguingly, subtle variations in composition hinted that the clay might have been prepared or sourced by different workshops, suggesting a decentralized yet organized production system rather than one single massive factory. Further clues came directly from the figures, scattered across the bodies of many warriors, often in inconspicuous places like underarms or on robes. Archaeologists discovered impressed stamps or inscriptions bearing names, numbers, or symbols. These weren't random marks, they were artisan seals or workshop identifiers. It's believed that these marks served as a quality control system. Foremen or specific artisans essentially signed their work, allowing administrators overseeing the massive project to track production and ensure standards were met. This practice, documented in other Qin industries, pointed towards a highly organized, state-controlled labor force involving government workshops and potentially conscripted local craftsmen. It was a clear sign of the bureaucratic efficiency underpinning the entire endeavor. Attention also turned to the thousands of real bronze weapons found alongside the warriors. Swords, spears, lances, triggers for crossbows, and tens of thousands of arrowheads, often found bundled in groups of 100. Early analysis of these remarkably preserved weapons sparked decades of debate, focusing particularly on traces of chromium found on some surfaces. But beyond the preservation question, the weapons themselves offered production clues. Detailed analysis, such as X-ray fluorescent spectrometry used on vast numbers of arrowheads, revealed fascinating patterns. Arrowheads within a single bundle showed consistent chemical compositions distinct from other bundles. This suggested they were produced in batches, likely within specific workshops, further supporting the idea of a cellular, organized production system rather than a single assembly line. The clay, the marks, and the metal were all starting to tell a story. Solving the production puzzle. The breakthrough in understanding how the Terracotta Army was made came with the realization that it wasn't a case of either mass production or individual craftsmanship, but a sophisticated combination of both. Modern scientific techniques, including detailed material analysis, meticulous archaeological observation, and crucially the application of 3D scanning and statistical analysis, finally cracked the code. The secret lay in a modular production system, remarkably similar in principle to modern manufacturing, including approaches later famously adopted by companies like Toyota. As a single solid. Instead of creating each warrior as a single solid piece, the Qin workshops mass-produced standardized body parts. Think of it like building with ancient Lego bricks. Common elements like legs, possibly made using techniques similar to contemporary terracotta drainage pipe manufacturing. Torsos, arms, and basic head shapes were created separately, likely using molds. Evidence suggests there might have been around 8 different torso types and perhaps 10 basic face molds used to create the foundational shapes. These standardized parts could be produced relatively quickly and efficiently by different specialized teams or workshops. Once these basic components were made and likely fired, they were assembled. Legs were joined, torsos attached, arms positioned in various poses, holding weapons, driving chariots, standing at attention, and heads placed on top. This assembly process allowed for some initial variation. different combinations of parts could create different basic figures. The pieces were joined using strips or coils of wet clay, a luting process, before the completed figure might undergo further firing or finishing. The use of 3D laser scanning technology has been pivotal in confirming this modular system. By scanning numerous warriors and comparing their dimensions with high precision, researchers could identify subtle but consistent patterns. Statistical analysis of these scans revealed clusters of figures sharing near-identical dimensions for specific body parts, like ears, which also appear to have been made using molds and then attached, strongly supporting the theory of mold-based production for core components. This wasn't a single monolithic assembly line, but likely a network of workshops, each potentially specializing in certain parts or assembly stages, all contributing to the final vast army. This ingenious system allowed the Qin to achieve the necessary scale while providing a foundation upon which individual artistry could flourish. Crafting individuality. The genius of the Terracotta Army's production wasn't just in its modular efficiency, but in how it seamlessly integrated mass production with bespoke artistry. While the body's limbs and basic head shapes might have come from molds, providing a standardized canvas, the final crucial stage was all about hand craftsmanship. This is where the figures truly came alive and gained their striking individuality. After the basic components were assembled, skilled artisans would take these standardized, somewhat generic heads and begin to customize them. Working with additional layers of fine clay applied to the molded base, they meticulously sculpted the details that make each warrior appear unique. They would shape the eyes, define the nose and mouth, add wrinkles or smooth the skin, and model distinct ears, sometimes using pre-molded ear shapes but applying them differently or adding detail. Perhaps most significantly, they crafted individual hairstyles, complex top knots, braids, caps, or simpler cuts, each rendered with precision, and added specific facial hair like mustaches and beards of varying styles and lengths. Some figures appear clean-shaven, possibly representing younger soldiers, adding another layer of realism. This final stage of hand finishing was crucial. It allowed artisans to imbue each figure with character and expression. Some look stern and determined, others perhaps thoughtful or calm. Although likely based on a limited number of basic molds, estimates suggest around 10 core face molds. This subsequent hand modeling created potentially thousands of subtle variations. Think of it like having a basic mannequin head and then sculpting unique features onto it. The underlying structure might be similar, but the final result is distinct. This process highlights the incredible skill of the Qin artisans. They weren't just laborers assembling parts, they were artists capable of rendering lifelike details efficiently and consistently across thousands of figures. They successfully blended the demands of mass production required by the emperor with the artistic sensitivity needed to create a convincingly realistic and diverse army. The result is a breathtaking illusion, an army of individuals born from a system of standardized parts transformed by human hands. The warriors' bodies might speak of industry, but their faces speak of artistry. The enduring weapons mystery. Alongside the terracotta figures, archaeologists unearthed an astonishing arsenal of real bronze weapons. Over 40,000 items have been recovered so far, including swords, daggers, spears, lances, battle axes, crossbow triggers, and vast quantities of arrowheads. What immediately struck researchers was the remarkable state of preservation of many of these weapons. Despite being buried for over 2 millennia in damp earth, some blades remained incredibly sharp and surfaces appeared almost untarnished, retaining a surprising sheen. How was this possible? For decades, a captivating theory dominated explanations. The Qin artisans possessed a secret, advanced anti-rust technology involving chromium. Early chemical analyses detected traces of chromium on the surfaces of some weapons. This led to the widespread belief that the Qin had invented a precursor to modern chromate conversion coating, a chemical treatment used to passivate metals and prevent corrosion, a technology only patented in the early 20th century. The idea that the first emperor's weapon makers had mastered a technique almost 2,200 years ahead of its time was incredibly appealing and cited frequently. It added another layer of technological marvel to the Terracotta Army narrative. However, more recent and rigorous scientific investigations, particularly studies published around 2019 involving collaborations between institutions like University College London, the University of Cambridge, and the Terracotta Army Museum, have largely debunked this theory. By analyzing hundreds of weapons and carefully mapping the distribution of chromium, researchers found inconsistencies. Firstly, chromium was only present on a relatively small percentage of the weapons studied, around 37 out of 464 in one major study. Secondly, its presence didn't correlate well with the best preserved weapons. Many impeccably preserved blades had no chromium coating at all. Thirdly, the highest concentrations of chromium were often found not on the blades themselves, but on fittings like grips and pommels, parts that would have been attached to organic materials like wood or bamboo shafts and handles. The current leading explanation suggests the chromium was not an intentional anti-rust treatment. Instead, it was likely unintentional contamination from chromium-rich lacquer used to treat the wooden or bamboo parts of the weapons like shafts and handles, or possibly even transferred from the lacquered terracotta figures buried nearby. The excellent preservation is now thought to be due to a combination of other factors: the high tin content of the bronze alloy used, specific quenching techniques employed during manufacturing, and, perhaps most importantly, the unique chemistry of the local loess soil. The soil's moderately alkaline pH, fine particle size, and low organic content created a surprisingly protective burial environment. So, while the weapon's condition remains remarkable, it seems attributable to fortunate material science and environmental chemistry, rather than a lost, futuristic anti-corrosion technology. The Emperor's unseen workforce. Creating the Terracotta Army wasn't just an artistic or technological feat. It was a staggering logistical undertaking that speaks volumes about the power and organizational capacity of the Qin state. Imagine the resources required: vast quantities of specific yellow clay, sourced locally but needing extraction, transport, and preparation, enormous amounts of wood for scaffolding, structural supports within the pits, and firing the kilns needed to bake the thousands of figures and horses, significant amounts of bronze for crafting tens of thousands of functional weapons, and precious lacquer and mineral pigments for the final, colorful decoration. Sadly, much of the paint flaked off rapidly upon excavation when exposed to air. Mobilizing these materials on such a scale required immense coordination, but even more demanding was organizing the human labor. Historical texts claim that up to 720,000 workers were involved in constructing the entire mausoleum complex over nearly 4 decades. While this number likely includes laborers working on the tomb mound and other structures, the workforce dedicated to the Terracotta Army itself must still have been enormous. Thousands of skilled artisans like potters, sculptors, and painters, alongside countless laborers for digging the massive pits, up to 7 meters deep, transporting materials, firing kilns, and assembling the figures. Evidence from grave pits found near the site, containing skeletons believed to be workers, suggests a diverse group, many possibly conscripts or prisoners, working under harsh conditions. The production system itself, with its modular design, batch production of weapons, and artisan marks for quality control, reflects a highly sophisticated level of administrative organization. It implies careful planning, division of labor, specialized workshops, standardized procedures, and rigorous oversight, all hallmarks of the centralized bureaucratic state Qin Shi Huang had forged. The ability to command such vast resources and coordinate such a complex multi-stage production process involving potentially hundreds of thousands of people over decades demonstrates the absolute power wielded by the first emperor and the efficiency, however brutal, of his administration. The Terracotta Army isn't just an artistic marvel. It's a tangible manifestation of Qin imperial logistics and state control, a monument built by an unseen, highly organized, and massive workforce. The army revealed. So, what have we learned after decades of digging, analysis, and wonder? The central mystery that once shrouded the Terracotta army, how such a vast and seemingly individualized force could be created in ancient times, has now been largely unveiled by scientific inquiry. We now understand the brilliant synthesis of mass production and individual artistry that defined its creation. The key lies in the ingenious modular system. Standardized body parts, likely formed using molds, were mass-produced in specialized workshops. These components, legs, torsos, arms, basic head shapes, were then assembled much like an ancient assembly line, allowing for efficient construction on an immense scale. The magic of individuality came next. Skilled artisans took these standardized bases and applied layers of fine clay, hand-sculpting unique facial features, intricate hairstyles, and distinct expressions onto each figure. This combination allowed the Qin state to meet the emperor's demand for a massive afterlife guard while simultaneously achieving a startling level of realism and diversity. Furthermore, the enduring puzzle of the remarkably preserved bronze weapon seems solved not by invoking lost super technology like chromium plating, but by understanding the favorable chemistry of the local soil combined with the specific bronze alloys and potential lacquer coatings used. The artisan marks reveal a highly organized, state-controlled workforce operating under strict quality control, reflecting the administrative power of the unified empire.